Let me start with something that might sound uncomfortable, but it's necessary. The moment you hear the phrase once in a lifetime investment opportunity, that's not your signal to lean in. It's your signal to slow down. Because think about it logically. If something is truly that rare, that powerful, and that profitable, why is it being marketed so aggressively? Why is someone trying so hard to convince you to act quickly? Real opportunities don't usually come with countdown timers, dramatic promises, or emotional pressure. They don't need to. The best investments in history weren't hidden behind urgency. They were built on clarity, patience, and long-term thinking. What actually happens in these moments is psychological, not financial. Your brain shifts from analysis to emotion. You start imagining the upside, the money you could make, the life that could change, the regret you might feel if you miss out. And suddenly, the fear of missing out becomes stronger than your ability to think critically. That's where mistakes begin. Most people don't lose money because they lack intelligence. They lose money because they get caught in moments like this, where excitement overrides discipline. The language used in these situations is carefully designed. Words like exclusive, limited, urgent, and once in a lifetime are not there to inform you. They're there to influence you. They create a sense of scarcity, and scarcity creates pressure. And under pressure, people don't make good financial decisions. So instead of asking, how much can I make from this? You need to flip the question entirely. Ask, what am I not being told? Ask, if this is such a great opportunity, why does it need selling? Because genuinely strong investments don't rely on persuasion. They rely on fundamentals. They make sense even when you remove the hype. Another important point, real wealth building opportunities are often boring. They don't feel urgent. They don't spike your adrenaline. In fact, they can feel almost too simple. Consistent investing, diversification, long-term growth. But because they're not exciting, people overlook them. They wait for something dramatic, something that feels like a breakthrough moment. And that's exactly when they become vulnerable to these once-in-a-lifetime narratives. You have to understand that urgency is often manufactured. It's a tool. And the moment you feel rushed in a financial decision, that's the exact moment you need to pause. Step back. Give yourself space to think. Because money doesn't reward speed, it rewards clarity. So before you even consider investing in anything labeled as a rare or life-changing opportunity, ground yourself in reality. Remind yourself that building wealth is not about catching one perfect moment. It's about making a series of well-thought-out decisions over time. Missing one opportunity will not ruin your future, but making one emotional decision absolutely can. And that's the shift you need to make. From reacting to thinking. From chasing to evaluating. Because the people who build lasting wealth aren't the ones who jump at every opportunity. They're the ones who know exactly when to walk away. Now let's talk about what's really happening behind the scenes when someone tells you an opportunity is limited, exclusive, or only available for a short time. This is where psychology quietly takes control. Because the moment you believe something is scarce, your brain automatically assigns it more value. Not because it is more valuable, but because it feels like you might lose access to it. And humans are wired to avoid loss far more than they are motivated by gain. So instead of thinking, is this a good investment? Your mind shifts to, what if I miss this? That subtle shift is everything. You stop evaluating and start reacting. And this is exactly what many so-called opportunities rely on. They're not built on strong fundamentals. They're built on urgency. You'll hear things like only 24 hours left, or last few spots remaining, or this price will never come back again. But if you pay close attention, these deadlines often reset, the offers reappear, and the exclusive access somehow keeps expanding. Because the scarcity was never real to begin with, it was manufactured. In finance, anything that is truly valuable doesn't need artificial pressure. Think about it. Strong businesses, solid investments, long-term growth strategies, they don't disappear overnight. Markets don't reward people for being the fastest. They reward people for being the most rational. Yet urgency tricks you into believing that speed is your advantage, when in reality, it's your biggest risk. And here's where it becomes dangerous. When you're rushed, you don't ask the deeper questions. You don't fully understand what you're investing in. You don't analyze the downside. You don't consider whether this fits into your broader financial plan. You're too focused on not missing out, so you ignore the possibility of being wrong. That's how people end up putting money into things they barely understand. It could be a trending asset, a hot tip, a new platform everyone is suddenly talking about, or even a polished pitch that sounds convincing on the surface. The details feel less important in the moment because the pressure is telling you, decide now, think later. But in finance, think later is where losses show up. The reality is, real opportunities don't punish you for taking your time. If something is genuinely worth investing in, it will still make sense tomorrow, next week, or even next month. And if it doesn't, then it was never as strong as it seemed. You have to train yourself to become resistant to this kind of pressure, not by ignoring opportunities, but by refusing to let urgency dictate your decisions. Slowing down is not weakness, it's strategy. It gives you the space to separate facts from emotion, value from hype, and logic from persuasion. And here's a simple rule that can save you from a lot of costly mistakes. If you feel rushed, don't invest. No matter how good it sounds, no matter how convincing it seems. Because the best financial decisions are made with clarity, not pressure. At the end of the day, scarcity is one of the oldest tactics in the book. It's powerful because it feels real. But once you recognize it for what it is, a trigger, not a truth, you stop being controlled by it. And that's when you start making decisions like someone who actually builds wealth instead of someone who constantly chases it. Now shift your perspective for a moment, because this is where most people get it wrong. When they hear the phrase once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, they imagine something dramatic, something fast-moving, exciting, and capable of changing everything overnight. But the reality is almost the opposite. The opportunities that actually build wealth don't feel like opportunities at all in the moment. They feel slow, repetitive, sometimes even boring. And that's exactly why people ignore them. Real investing is not about finding one perfect deal that multiplies your money instantly. It's about consistently putting yourself in a position where your money can grow over time. That might mean investing regularly, even when the market feels uncertain. It might mean sticking to a plan when others are chasing trends. It might mean choosing discipline over excitement again and again. Because the real advantage in finance isn't access to secret opportunities, it's behavior. Take compounding, for example. On paper, it's one of the most powerful forces in wealth building. But in practice, it doesn't feel impressive day to day. You don't see massive changes overnight. You don't get that rush of quick wins. What you get instead is gradual progress that builds quietly in the background. And most people underestimate it simply because it's not dramatic enough. But over time, that quiet consistency becomes incredibly powerful. Another example is investing in strong, fundamentally sound assets. These are not always the things people are talking about at parties or posting about online. They don't always have hype around them, but they have something far more important: stability, resilience, and the ability to grow over the long term. They're built on real value, not speculation. The challenge is that these kinds of opportunities require patience. And patience is difficult when you're constantly exposed to stories of people making quick money elsewhere. It creates the illusion that you're falling behind even when you're actually doing the right thing. So instead of asking what's the next big thing, a better question is, what can I stick to consistently? Because consistency removes the need for perfect timing. It reduces risk. It allows you to benefit from long-term growth without relying on luck. And most importantly, it puts you in control of your financial decisions rather than reacting to whatever is trending at the moment. There's also an often overlooked opportunity that has nothing to do with markets at all: your ability to increase your earning potential. Building skills, improving your income, and creating multiple streams of revenue can have a far greater impact on your financial future than chasing a single investment. Yet people overlook this because it requires effort and time, not just money. When you combine higher income with consistent investing, that's where real momentum starts to build. The key takeaway here is simple. Real opportunities don't announce themselves loudly. They don't come with hype or pressure. They show up as habits, systems, and decisions that you repeat over time. And while they may not feel life-changing in the moment, they have the potential to change everything in the long run. So if you're waiting for something that feels like a breakthrough, a perfect moment that transforms your finances instantly, you might be overlooking the opportunities that actually matter. Because the truth is, the most powerful financial moves you'll ever make are the ones that don't feel exciting at all. They just feel consistent. And that consistency is what separates people who build wealth from those who are always searching for it. So here's where everything comes together. And this is the part most people don't want to hear. The real risk isn't that you'll miss out on a big opportunity. The real risk is that you'll say yes to the wrong one. Because in finance, a single bad decision can undo months or even years of progress. And those decisions rarely feel like mistakes in the moment. They feel exciting. They feel promising. They feel like you're finally getting ahead. That's what makes them dangerous. You don't lose money when things look uncertain. You lose money when things look too certain. When returns sound guaranteed. When the downside is barely mentioned. When everything seems perfectly aligned. That's when your guard drops. And this is why protecting your downside matters just as much, if not more, than chasing upside. Anyone can talk about how much money you could make. Very few people focus on what could go wrong. But the people who build lasting wealth are constantly thinking about risk, not in a fearful way, but in a strategic one. They ask better questions. What happens if this fails? How much can I afford to lose? Does this decision fit into my overall financial plan? Because a good investment isn't just about potential returns, it's about whether the risk makes sense for you. Another thing to understand is that not knowing is expensive. If you don't fully understand what you're putting your money into, you're not investing, you're guessing. And guessing over time leads to losses. It might work once or twice, but it's not a strategy you can rely on. That's why clarity matters. If something is complex, vague, or difficult to explain simply, that's a sign to pause. You don't need to understand every technical detail, but you should be able to explain the basic idea in your own words. If you can't, then you're depending on someone else's confidence instead of your own understanding. And that's a position you never want to be in with your money. There's also a subtle pressure that often goes unnoticed, the influence of other people. When everyone around you seems to be investing in something, talking about it, or profiting from it, it creates a sense that you should be doing the same. But following the crowd in finance is rarely a winning strategy. By the time something becomes popular, a lot of the opportunity is already gone. Discipline means being willing to sit out even when others are jumping in. It means being comfortable with the idea that you might miss something and being okay with that. Because missing out is temporary, losing money unnecessarily has a much longer impact. At the end of the day, every financial decision you make is a trade-off. You're not just choosing where to put your money, you're choosing what level of risk you're willing to accept, what timeline you're working with, and what kind of strategy you believe in. So before you commit to anything, slow the process down. Remove the noise. Strip away the excitement. Look at it as objectively as you can. Because the goal isn't to chase every opportunity that comes your way. The goal is to choose the right ones, and more importantly, to avoid the wrong ones. That's the difference. And once you understand that, you stop looking for shortcuts and start building something that actually lasts.